All right, it's 1 o'clock. Let's go and get started. All right, good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Good, good. First of all, I apologize. I know I said I'd have the exams ready for you today, but there's some things came up on Friday when I was grading. So I'm not quite done, but I am about 3/4 of the way done grading the exam. So I'm hoping to actually finish it up tonight. So I'm gonna stay a bit late today after work and finish those up. Just so that you'll know what you'll have. It'll be on Canvas by tonight. And then they'll be ready for pickup for you on Thursday. So again, so I apologize for that, but by Thursday for sure. You know, I have like 7, 8, 9 more exams to go, and so yeah, they'll be ready for you on Thursday. Okay. So the other announcement I want to make is that so all the groups at this point should be formed for your final projects. I only received the agreement of shared responsibilities from a few groups. So if your group hasn't had a chance to send me that, please send it to me soon. Just because I want to make sure that you guys, everyone in your group kind of knows how they're splitting the work. Okay. Make sure you guys are all on the same page for that. So just to kind of remind you, so that document is just a 1-page document, just kind of detailing how your group plans to split the work. So that's all the different sections of the final project. So just so you can split your research a bit more equitably, but also make sure that you leave room in there just so your group knows like who's going to put it all together, who's going to edit it all, who's going to make sure that all the font is the same, that all the sections fit together. There's no redundancies and things like that. Okay. So make sure you send me that agreement of shared responsibilities as soon as possible. Okay. Because we're very quickly getting to the end of the semester. So we have 2 lectures this week, 2 lectures next week, and then after that, it's final presentations already. And so, you want to make sure that everyone on your team is on the same page in terms of what they're doing. Okay. Another announcement. So probably a lot of you noticed over the weekend. I think probably most people noticed. I extended the due date for the individual writing assignment till tonight at midnight. So if you hadn't had a chance to turn that in, you have until midnight tonight to turn it in. Granted, remember, as part of the policies in the class, your lowest homework will be dropped. And so if you turn in all your other homeworks up to this point in this semester, then homework 6 will automatically be dropped if you don't do it. But with that said, this is a very valuable opportunity in terms of getting feedback. So once everyone turns it in, basically tomorrow, what I plan to do is I plan to read through all of your individual writing assignments and I'm going to try to give you guys as much feedback as I can. And of course, that feedback you can use for your final project as well. Okay. Just because, it's this whole thing about writing and research is very different from everything that we've been doing in this class. We've just kind of been traditional, just like homework problem sets and exams. So we haven't really had a big chance to practice writing and kind of, and for you guys to kind of feel like what I'm, or get a feel for what I'm expecting in terms of this. And so this writing assignment is kind of your chance to, turn something in, get feedback from me, just so you get a better idea in terms of what I'm looking for. Okay. And so, you can choose not to turn it in, of course, it's not going to be, even if you've already missed another homework assignment, it's not going to be fatal towards your grade. But usually, generally speaking, you don't want the final project of your class to be the first chance that you get is writing something and getting feedback. So, if anything, just for the chance of getting feedback and kind of getting a chance to see what I'm looking out for, then the individual writing assignment is a great chance for that. But also just all of the case studies for that individual writing assignment are also very fascinating as well. And so they're just kind of fun to learn about just from perspective. Okay. All right. So with that said, the plan for today is we're going to be talking about organizational ethics today. So this has to do with corporate ethics, just your relationship with your company in terms of what your general expectations are, what your expectations for management is. And kind of how to navigate around that fix. And there's actually a lot to talk about here. So this section isn't traditional, I would say, in an engineering ethics class. But I know that I know for sure that a lot of you are planning to graduate from here and work in a company that has a lot of these dynamics. And so I want to make sure I get a chance to kind of talk about this just to kind of prep you a little bit, just as these topics are kind of typically things that you don't really learn about in the classroom. And sometimes when you learn about them on your job, sometimes it's a little bit too late for something. So I want to make sure that I spend a bit of time in this class talking about this because, honestly, it doesn't really fit with any other classes. Okay. All right. Any questions I can answer before we get started for today? Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. If I sound a bit tired today, I apologize too. I was watching the Laker game with my friends last night, and we all were very sad. So we all kind of stayed up and couldn't sleep last night. So yeah, Lakers are cursed. They can't beat the Nuggets anymore. Okay, organizational ethics. So what this whole section is about is what it's like to be an engineer in a company. And so as part of a bigger company, there's a lot of kind of additional dynamics, a lot of additional kind of relationships and things that you have to manage as part of being, part of that company, right? And a lot of times, as an engineer, all engineers, they train very hard to kind of get to where they are, right? So you go through all of your undergraduate, you study really hard, you take all these really hard classes, you get out there, and you have all these skills and you have all these kind of expectations in terms of the work that you're going to do, right? And so part of that, comes with the responsibility towards your profession. So kind of a lot of things that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks in terms of, keeping people safe, doing good for society, making cool technology, right? But when the reality is, when you go out and you join a company, you also have some responsibility to the company as well to make sure that, that the company kind of succeeds in what they're doing too. Okay. And so there's a lot of kind of complicated dynamics in terms of, conflicts of interest that are kind of important to be aware of as you get into the job. Okay. And odds are, for most of you, you're going to graduate and work for a large company, just because engineering work just if that hasn't been apparent so far with all the economics we've been doing, engineering is very expensive. So just to buy the equipment and to buy the manpower and to buy all the everything, it takes a lot of resources, and it kind of limits just how what kinds of companies can do this kind of work. And most of those companies are just very large companies with very large amount of resources. Okay. And so with any kind of large company, there's a lot of kind of politics and things that kind of go on at the same time. Okay? So I want to start today with a story. So this is a real story. So this actually happened. So this is a story of an engineer named Paul Lorenz, who was an engineer for a company called Martin Marietta, which was a key contractor for NASA in the 70s. Okay. So I bring this story up just to kind of illustrate, maybe some of the conflicts of interest that can arise, and what you can do about it sometimes, right? So the story of Mr. Lorenz here was that he was laid off from his company in 1975. Okay. Um, and the reason for it had nothing really to do with the performance of the company itself. Because usually when you hear about layoffs, usually it's because, the company's not doing well, they need to cut costs, and so, they need to lay people. Um, Martin Marietta wasn't in that position. And so they weren't in a position where they were struggling. In fact, this was kind of their heyday. This was kind of when, the contracts from NASA were flowing in, interest in space travel, interest in space launch, it was kind of at an all-time high at that point. So, there wasn't a shortage of work to do. Yet, Mr. Lawrence here was let go from his company. I guess maybe a better phrase would say that he was fired, but he was, they kind of try to skirt around that to avoid paying unemployment benefits, right? Um, and so, that kind of begs the question of, what was the reason why he was let go? And not only that, how do we know the reason that he was let go, right? So there has to be a reason why this case is famous, right? So he was let go. The reason he was let go in 1975 was that he refused to engage in the misrepresentation of the quality of the materials that Martin Marietta produced. So if you know anything about, the aerospace industry, sending a plane or a rocket ship to space, requires the interaction or requires a lot of contractors to do a lot of the work for NASA, right? And so usually what happens is that, NASA says that, we have this thing that we want to do, we have this project that we need to accomplish, and they ask companies to bid for the rights to basically kind of fulfill that need, right? Whether it be providing materials or doing certain types of engineering work, or maybe doing certain parts of construction, right? Getting these contracts is pretty much vital to the survival of these companies, right? And Martin Marietta kind of specialized in producing these kinds of materials that were needed by NASA at the time. Okay. So NASA kind of set certain specifications in terms of what they expected from the quality of the materials that they needed. So things like their thermal properties, things like their structural properties, things like that, right? And so they need to have a certain amount of strength, they need to have a certain amount of insulation. Basically what happened was that Martin Marietta was a little bit dishonest in terms of the quality of their products, in terms of what they were telling NASA, right? And so in order for them to kind of win the contract for the job, they kind of had to kind of fudge their numbers a little. And so Mr. Morenz here basically refused to engage in that. So he refused to kind of misrepresent the data. He refused to give false data. And so the company let him go because he was not able to do this. Okay. Okay. So if that was the end of the story, kind of the unfortunate thing is, we probably would never have heard about because these kind of things kind of get swept under the rug in terms of NDAs and whatnot. Okay. But Mr. Morenz felt so strongly that his company was engaging in illegal behavior that he took it to court. Okay? And it's for that reason, the fact that he took the company to court, that a lot of these details came to light, right? And so as part of the court proceedings, all of these kind of all of these kind of things came out, and the court actually sided in favor of Mr. Moritz, right? And so, but the thing with our justice system is that it's not known for being particularly speedy about anything. And so it wasn't until 1992 that the Colorado Supreme Court ruled that Mr. Morenz was unfairly terminated for his actions. And so something that started in the 70s, didn't really reach a conclusion until the 90s. So, at that point, I don't know if the company's still around. I think they may have dissolved. Certainly they had to pay out a lot as part of this court settlement as well. But I bring up this story just because that here you have kind of a classical kind of situation where you have an engineer that's kind of uncomfortable with doing something. Meanwhile, you have a company that wants to do something that when you put it like this, it seems like the company was kind of being the bad guy here, that they were kind of purposely lying to misrepresent the data. But another way that you can think about it is that the company was trying to do what it needed to survive, just because the getting these kinds of contracts from NASA was a very competitive process, right? And of course, it's wrong to lie, it's wrong to misrepresent data, you know. But I bring up this story just to kind of illustrate that a lot of times engineers and the companies that they work for are often at odds in terms of their in terms of their interests, in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. Right? And I want to make something clear, before we move forward, that, of course, I'm speaking from the perspective of an engineer. I'm also speaking from the perspective of an employee in a very large company as well. But, I have my own biases, of course. Probably you guys all know how I feel about the management here, but, I don't want to paint the picture of like, all management is bad and engineers are always the good guys, right? That's very far from the truth, because there's a lot of really great managers out there. There's a lot of really great engineers. And, sometimes just, just things come at odds, and one person's trying to accomplish something, but then the other person's trying to accomplish something, but they're both trying to do good at the same time. And so you can have a situation where both parties are trying to do good, just in different ways, just because they see things from different perspectives, and they see kind of different things as well, right? So I want to make it clear that, just because, just because I'm gonna try really hard not to put my own biases into this, but this is not a good guys versus bad guys type of thing. It's just, it's all about, you guys are all working for the same company: engineers, management, financial people, everyone. It's, how do you kind of come to a consensus? How do you kind of, make something work, so that everyone's needs are kind of met, and both you and the company can succeed in the best way possible. Okay. All right. Any questions on this so far? Okay. All right. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this relationship. So let's look at the typical kind of relationship between the engineers and management. Okay. Okay. So part of the reason why, engineers and management kind of find themselves at odds with each other is that a lot of times our training is just very different, right? So, in the best case scenario, you end up working for a company, and your manager is a former engineer, right? So they have kind of the same background, the same training as you, so they kind of understand where you're coming from. But that's not the reality a lot of the times. Maybe your direct manager may be of that caliber, but, if you go a little further up in the chain, you're going to have people that more specialize in business, and so their background is more getting MBAs, business school courses. They see kind of the numbers of the company, and so on and so forth. Okay. Have I seen Flash of Genius? No, I haven't yet. I've heard of it, but I haven't had a chance to see it yet. But yeah, definitely a good one for this topic. All right. So most, pretty much all engineers are going to have the same background and training as everyone in this class. And so outside of this particular class, all of your other engineering courses are all very technical in nature, right? And so you have to learn about just the physics and the equations, and kind of, how to design products, and so on and so forth, right? So engineering training is just by its nature just extremely technical, because it's a very technical field. Whereas if you look at the typical, management person, so someone who's got an MBA, they've gone to business school and all that stuff, I can guarantee you that, that they're taking a course like this, but probably times 5 or 6 or something like that. So they've had a lot more management training or more kind of soft skills training than engineers typically do. And so just by that nature, just the method of communication and the way that that we that we speak and we talk about kind of business is very different. And so that makes communication kind of very, very difficult. Maybe you guys have noticed this already. So if you have any friends or buddies kind of in the business school here, and you kind of talk about kind of what and if you've ever gotten into a conversation in terms of what they're learning in their classes, what you're learning in your classes, it's hard, and it's not just that, the content of whatever you're learning is different. It's just that the way you talk about it, the way you kind of organize thoughts in your head, the way you express it, is different, right? So engineers are kind of very, I would say, kind of like we like to see things in kind of like a list, I guess you can say, right? Whereas managers are a little bit different, right? And so and whenever you have a situation where communication is hard, it's always going to be hard to kind of build a relationship among them. Okay. And so in particular, a lot of times, when you have an issue with the product, it's technical in nature, right? And so if you need to kind of change something, you either need to change the budget, you need to change the schedule, you need to kind of push the release date back a little bit. It's the engineer has to communicate these technical issues effectively to people who don't have technical training. Okay. And so as a result, and when I say, and I think people's first impression when seeing this is that, oh, two sides they're just never going to see, right? It's never that extreme where like you try to explain something and management just says no, right? It's more that, maybe certain issues don't get emphasized as much, or, maybe certain things don't get as much attention, or the severity of certain issues doesn't get effectively communicated. And so, these are kind of hard because especially if you're in an environment where you're kind of working together with engineers on a daily basis, there's a certain way that you kind of talk about certain issues and certain things occurring, and then to kind of take that same kind of language and try to explain to someone else, a lot of things are just going to get lost in translation. Okay. Okay. So usually what tends to happen is that the what usually comes across well. It's like you need this, right? So as an engineer, you say, we need more budget, or we need more time, or we need these certain tools, or we need these certain resources. And so that information usually comes across okay, but usually not the why. And so, usually the reasons why, that's a little bit harder to explain because, part of understanding the reason why is, having all this training, all this education, and all these classes that you've taken. And that just doesn't extend for this as well. So if you've ever had like a younger sibling or a younger cousin, and you try to kind of teach them something that's important for them, like brushing their teeth, washing their hands, or eating their vegetables or something like that, right? And so, you can tell them what to do. That's usually not hard to say that, you got to brush your teeth, but they don't really understand why, because they haven't really experienced toothache, they haven't experienced tooth decay, they don't really know what it is, and so they're just really kind of doing it just because you're telling them to. And a lot of that kind of tends to happen in companies as well. And that goes the other way as well. And so, maybe the management will tell you something that we need to release by a certain date. We need to kind of market this a certain way. We need to have some things ready by a tech show or something like that. So, as an engineer, you'll do these things because you're told, but it's sometimes it's a little bit hard to understand kind of why that is, or why it's important to kind of reach these milestones, right? So it goes kind of both ways. So, just kind of being aware that when you're communicating that, a lot of times, the people that you're communicating with don't have the same kind of background as you, I think kind of helps to kind of, bridge that gap. Right. And of course, communicating with people is, even among engineers is sometimes it's not easy as well. But just kind of being really kind of thinking about how you communicate things. Part of the final project is being able to communicate not only in writing, but also in the final presentation as well. Communication is very important. And I think just kind of just making a little bit of an effort to kind of understand where people are coming from, what their background is, I think will help a lot in terms of, getting your point across and being productive. Okay. Okay. Another reason why, sometimes the relationship between engineers and management can get strained is just in different interests, right? So the primary responsibility for management, the people that are kind of running your company, is the success of the company. Okay. It is their responsibility to make sure that that the company can open its doors the next day, the next month, the next year, and many years to come. Okay. And nowadays, a lot of this, involves kind of not only making sure that the company is financially viable, but also making shareholders happy as well. So people that have invested money in the company, trying to make all those people happy as well that's what management is for. Okay. Whereas engineers are, of course, engineers are interested in the financial success of the company because they're the ones that's paying their salary. But they don't, a lot of times engineers don't really see that full bigger picture. And so I would say that in general, engineers are generally more concerned with kind of the success of their own projects, their own products, making sure it runs well, it's efficient, it's safe for people, more so than kind of the overall success of the company. So as an example, kind of the very classical example is that, let's say that during development of a certain product, then it's discovered that there's kind of a big issue in terms of safety or reliability or something like that. Okay. Okay. And so if such an issue is discovered, generally the engineer will want to kind of fix this before, showing anything out, right? So This usually that involves, extending timelines, making, asking to delay the launch, right? To a certain date. And so, engineers will want to kind of fix these kind of as soon as possible. Okay. So any issues with safety, any issues with quality, that's a top priority thing. Everything else kind of, you know, everything else kind of needs to be sidelined until that's taken care of. Okay? Whereas if, if such an issue were to come up and it's brought to management, management, they're trying to look at kind of the bigger picture for this. And so they may see safety and reliability maybe as just another issue among a list of kind of many others. Okay. Because yes, a lot of times, and you ask kind of a room of engineers like this, right? If there's kind of some kind of safety issue with the product, the right thing to do would be to kind of either halt production or extend production until it's solved, right? Because the last thing you want to do, the last thing we would want to do as engineers is kind of put a product out there that's unsafe for people, right? Because a lot of times, engineers, we're kind of thinking about our next step as well. So, let's say that, we're on this kind of really big project, right? It's something that we've kind of dedicated maybe the last, few years of our lives to, and then, it gets out to the public, right? But then, maybe issues happen, people start to get hurt or things like that, right? It gets in the news, and then all of a sudden, now your own career is kind of in jeopardy because now you're the engineer that's kind of associated with this project. And then, and so if the company goes under or things like that, then, it's going to be that much harder for you, to get your next job because, you were tied to that project where like, oh, you were an engineer on that car. Wasn't that car, known for, blowing up on people? That's very hard to do. And so, whenever there's such an issue that, kind of, I almost want to say it's not really pride, but, it's one way that you can look at it as an engineer, to kind of make sure that that issue is kind of, fixed as much as possible, right? But if you think about it from your manager's point of view, they're thinking about things like, if we push this back, that's going to, it's going to bring a lot of bad press. It's going to, affect our sales. It's going to affect, how people see the product, things like that. And that's going to affect kind of the long-term health of the company as well. So it's a difficult thing to kind of balance, and it's again, this is kind of one situation where, where both sides are trying to do generally trying to do kind of what's right and what's good, for themselves and for the company as a whole. But of course, it kind of manifests itself into a difference of opinion. But kind of understanding that is kind of important, and can kind of help you kind of navigate some of those conversations that you may have. Okay. Okay. Any questions on this so far? Okay. So it's especially more complicated because, as engineers, we have our code of ethics that we're kind of dedicated to our profession as well. At the same time, engineers also have a professional responsibility to their companies to try to do everything that they can to make sure the company is successful. Okay. So engineers kind of have two, you can kind of consider as kind of two responsibilities. Okay? Okay. So not only do you have your kind of professional codes of ethics that are given by, IEEE, NSPE, things like that, but you also have to, be responsible for your company as well, right? There's no such code of ethics for managers, right? So managers really only have their loyalties to the company itself. And so kind of, most of the things that they're going to do is going to be for the company to make sure that that the company's success, right? So that's kind of another thing to keep in mind. Okay. Okay. All right. So with that said, now that we've kind of, talked a little bit about kind of the general kind of differences in terms of the approach and training and mindset of engineers and management, let's talk a little bit about company culture. Okay. So anytime you have a large organization, there's a certain kind of, what we kind of call culture to. Okay? Okay. And how you define culture is the way I kind of define it is it's the kind of the general mindsets and viewpoints that are adopted by the people in the company. Okay. And these mindsets usually drive, the kinds of decisions that are made, the ways that the company tries to motivate people. It usually determines how people in the company react to certain things, and so it's a culture, right? We live in a very interesting era for this. And so, before the age of kind of social media and everything being on the internet, a lot of times that, you wouldn't, you would hear kind of whispers a little bit here and there, but for the large part, you wouldn't really know what a company culture is like until you actually interviewed there, you started talking to people and things like that, right? Now it's a little bit easier to get information on this. And so there's online resources like Glassdoor that kind of talks about these things where people kind of review and kind of talk about their experiences working for certain companies. It's just generally nowadays it's a lot easier to connect with people. So if you know someone, or if you know someone who knows someone, or if you know someone who knows someone who knows someone that works at a certain company, it's a lot easier to kind of connect with them over social media, through the internet, text, whatever, to talk about kind of what it's like to work at a company, right? So getting this information about what company culture is like is kind of easier than ever. right? Especially if you're going to work for some of the more famous companies out there, things like Boeing, Amazon, Google, Apple. General people have a pretty good idea of kind of what it's like to work at these companies, just kind of based on all the information that's out there. Right? But with that said, if there's a lot of companies out there also that, that are big companies in their own right, but are maybe not as public as some of these kind of bigger tech companies. And so, maybe you're not aware. Maybe there's not that much information about what the culture is like. But this is something that's also very, very important for you when you go out and try to find your first company to work for, or your second company, and so on and so forth. Because not only, so when you're going out there and you're looking for, a full-time engineering job, yes, you have to find a fit in terms of, the kind of work that they're doing seems interesting to you, the pay is adequate for you, the location is good. If you're planning on moving away from here, you want to make sure that it's in a place that you like, right? But also important is to make sure that the culture for the company is something that kind of fits with your personality, right? It fits with your goals, because otherwise it can be very hard to kind of get out from that. So how is company culture set? Or how does company culture kind of become a thing, right? It's not something that just kind of spontaneously happens for the company, right? So generally speaking, company culture is set from the very top. So the kind of the attitudes and kind of the feelings of the people in charge of the company, the ownership, the executive board, they're the ones that kind of set the tone. They set the culture for the rest of the company. Okay. And that's mostly just because these are typically the people that have kind of the biggest sway in terms of decision making, right? So the big decisions in terms of what the company pursues, how they spend their budget, how many people they hire, all of that kind of comes directly from the top. And so kind of just naturally kind of their attitudes and their viewpoints and how they react to things, that kind of just naturally kind of permeates through the company. And of course it affects the people that they hire as well. And so, once they kind of set kind of the guidelines or kind of the responsibilities for certain people, then generally speaking, the same kind of people kind of get hired into these kinds of companies. Right? Okay. And so with that said, every company culture is extremely different, it'll be very hard to kind of talk about all of them in terms of what to kind of expect, right? Even in just my own short life, right? I've had a lot of buddies that have worked in a lot of different engineering companies, and I've heard just lots of really different things from their experiences there. Some things that are really wild that I'm surprised is even legal, but that's just the culture in those companies. And so generally speaking, I can kind of we can kind of break this down into, I would say, three broad categories, but just knowing that these categories are not all encompassing, and there's kind of a lot of some companies may exist in certain more than one category. Okay. Okay. So the first category of company culture to work is what I call engineer-oriented companies. So in these companies, they're usually led by an engineer, or there's an engineer among maybe the executive board, or maybe the founder's an engineer. And so, engineering priorities are going to take the number one, spot most of the time. And so one thing that you'll hear a lot in these types of companies is reputation, right? And so a lot of these companies have built their success on kind of the reputation on the quality of their products, right? And so if there's an issue that's affecting quality or an issue affecting safety of a product, within these types of companies, it's generally easier for an engineer to kind of raise these issues and to get the resources and the time that they need to fix them, before the product is shipped to market, right? Because because the success of these companies is so heavily built on their reputation, if they send out a product, they send out something that's not up to par, it's going to affect kind of it's going to really have a really big negative impact on the company. Um, just because if people don't trust their products, then there's not much else going on for these companies. Okay. But because they place quality and safety kind of above all else, generally in these companies, engineers and management have a pretty good relationship with each other. In fact, most of your managers are probably going to be engineers or former engineers, and so they kind of know where you're coming from. And so, engineers at these companies generally feel comfortable in terms of raising issues and trying to get the resources that they need. Okay. Now, of course, this all sounds great. And as a customer, as a consumer, you generally want to buy products from these kinds of companies because they stake their claim on the quality, right? Um, you have to be a little bit aware because of, whether a company is dedicated to quality or not. Um, you know, basically every company out there is going to market themselves as, we place quality first and safety first, right? Um, I don't think there's a car commercial on the planet that says that, yeah, we don't give a shit about safety, right? You want it, your part of your decision in buying a car is making sure that safety is number one. So just because a company says that their quality is top priority or their safety is top priority, you know, doesn't always mean that that's the case, right? So you kind of have to look past kind of the marketing and kind of talk to people within the company and read the reviews online in terms of what the company actually is. Okay. But if you are working for a company like this, generally it is a pretty good experience. And if anything, engineers actually feel like they're kind of part of, they're more invested in the company itself because they feel like the company is kind of supportive and wants to produce a product that they're also proud of as well. Okay. Okay. The second type of company that culture that's out there is called customer-oriented companies. So customer-oriented companies are, just like the name implies, they're more focused on kind of making their customers happy. So these are the types of companies that'll generally have a little bit of a bigger marketing department. They have a little bit more, they do a little bit more market research to try to find out what their customers are saying about their products, and they try to kind of, change what they do to fit their customers what they want. Okay? Okay. So you've probably seen some marketing from these types of companies, right? So companies that say they're always there for the customer, that that they'll be there for their every need, right? Um, and so that's kind of what these companies are. The general complaints about these types of companies that they can be a little bit trend chasing, and so a lot of times just certain types of technology, certain types of things they become really hot, and then they become really cold, right? And so for companies that are kind of so focused on kind of pleasing customers, they may kind of invest too many resources to chase kind of a fleeting trend. And as engineers, that can be a little bit annoying to work with, just because, you may be dedicated to a certain product in a certain way, but, if the customers want something different, or if they want a certain feature installed, or they want things to be done a little bit differently, even if it doesn't make any sense at all, a lot of times that, management will kind of force you to kind of change what you do based on this customer feedback. Okay. And so, what this means for the engineers, that generally there's a little bit more separation in terms of, what engineers feel and what their opinion is versus what the management feels. Okay. And of course, that can lead to a little bit more conflicts as well. Okay. A good example of this that happened fairly recently was kind of the whole craze over kind of crypto and NFTs and everything like that. So over COVID, probably you guys remember there was a lot of there's a big craze over using blockchain and cryptocurrencies and doing these NFTs. Everyone's getting NFT art, right? A bunch of companies sprung up from this. A lot of bigger companies tried to kind of get in on that craze as well. You have these huge video game companies adding NFTs into their video games for whatever reason. And now we fast forward today, and no one cares about NFTs at all. So everything that companies invested in terms of NFTs have basically just become wasted resources, right? And so that's kind of a situation where these companies were, customers were trying to say that, oh, we want this, we want this, we want NFTs in our games, we want to do all this crypto stuff, and then at the end of the day, it just died, and all this kind of investment that went into this was kind of wasted. Okay, and so the third type of company, probably the one that gets the most bad publicity, I guess, are what I call finance oriented companies. And so, of course, just like the name implies, this is the type of company culture that values profits and market success over basically everything else. And so because, profits and revenue is kind of the most important thing, management holds a lot of power in this company. And you're much more likely to run into situations where not only are you going to disagree with your management, but you're going to have situations where you really don't have an opportunity to provide input. And so you're going to just kind of do what they tell you to do, even if you don't feel comfortable with it. Even if you have to work 80 hours a week, they're going to make you do these kinds of things. But one thing that's good about these companies and the reason that people work for them is that the pay generally is higher, right? Generally speaking, there's a correlation out there in terms of how bad a company culture is versus the pay versus what they're willing to pay, right? And so if a company, and a lot of companies are kind of more or less kind of self-aware, are maybe I give them too much credit, but of that, their company culture is kind of sucky, or it kind of sucks to work for them. And so to get people to join that, then they generally pay higher than the average company. Okay? Generally. You do have the occasional company that not only has really bad culture, but also pays like shit too. So just be aware of that. But of course, I guess that's enough beating around the bush. But these are companies like Amazon, like that are kind of very known for kind of working their employees to the bone, and providing a very stressful work culture. But hardly there's probably no companies out there that pay better than Amazon, at least in terms of their engineers. So actually, I had a lot of friends that at some point in their professional lives, over the past 12, 13 years, that have worked for Amazon for 3 to 4 years. I have a couple friends that are still there, and so yeah, they're stressed all the time. They have probably like half a head of gray hair already. I don't see them anymore, but they're making a lot of money. They have a big house, and so and that's something that that you could value. And of course, if that's there's no judgment at all. And, you know, I think generally when I talk to these people that work for these companies, they said, yeah, it is very stressful. The culture is not great, but they try to find fulfillment in their personal life, in terms of friends that they have and the hobbies that they do, and that's how they kind of and making a lot of money, of course, makes it easier to have families who to fund hobbies and do things like that too. So they're all doing just fine. It's just that when they're at work, they're not the happiest. All right. Any questions on these at all? Yeah.
So like, if there's a risk of whistleblowers, committing suicide, things like that, that would be category 3, the highest risk of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I expect that, because I know you're doing the Boeing project, so I expect you're going to find a lot of information on this, especially in recent news too. So yeah, so those are the kind of situations where companies they may be engaging in kind of illegal and not so great things where engineers don't feel comfortable with. Engineers may leave, or they may report things to certain authorities. But the companies may also still do some things to keep putting stress on these people. And so, unfortunately, sometimes people have taken their lives over these things too, which is very unfortunate. Yeah, those are generally speaking, those kinds of situations always fall into category. So these are useful to think about. And so, not, I think, I mean, the main reason I'm doing this is just to talk about this, is to kind of give you context in terms of, in terms of the reports that you guys are preparing for your final projects. But, I think this is useful just for your own personal use as well. And so when you're out there kind of applying for jobs, thinking about the kind of culture that the company has, and see if that's something that fits with your personality, that you can kind of see yourself being happy, right? And at the end of the day too, that, and this is kind of getting away from the class a little bit, but, sometimes you don't know, right? So sometimes you don't know, whether you're going to gel with a certain type of company culture or not. But that's okay, right? And so when you sign on to a lot of these companies, it's not a life sentence, right? So you're not compelled to work for them for the rest of your life. In fact, it's actually very common for people to work for a company, 2, 3, 4 years, and then try to find another job, and then see what it's like there, and then find another job, right? People kind of do this even well into their careers, and so just kind of being aware of the culture, and seeing how that affects your own kind of happiness, how your own mental health, I think is a very important, very important question to ask yourself as you're kind of looking for jobs. Okay. Okay. All right. So company culture, obviously has a very big impact in terms of, how the company conducts themselves and the relationship with their employees. But, that said, even if you, like, let's say you work for a finance oriented company, as an engineer, you still have an ethical responsibility to do things, right? And so with that, and so when you view it within the lens of company culture, there's a few guidelines, or there's a few tips to kind of make sure that that you're able to kind of do that, to not only kind of fit within your company culture, but still act ethically as an engineer. Okay? And so part of this is also kind of protecting yourself as well, making sure that you did everything that you professionally could in some situations, so that that the company can't pin the blame on you. A lot of these bigger companies like to do that too, right? Okay, number one. So number one is do not be afraid to report bad news. Okay? So whether it be kind of a technical issue, something that's going to delay production, right? That's never a fun conversation to have with your manager, to say that, we need more time, we need more resources. Because of course, they're never going to be happy, right? But just because, a company culture, says it's going to be a bad idea, or you think, your manager's not going to be happy, you still need to report these kinds of things, and ask for the resources and the time that you need to fix everything that you need to, right? Whether or not you get them, that's kind of another matter entirely. But you can't be afraid to report bad news. Okay. And that goes for, non-technical issues as well. And so whether it be, maybe personal issues that you have with your manager, your manager is mistreating you or not treating you with respect, right? So this has to be reported as well, right? So a lot of companies will have ethics officers, HR departments to kind of report these things to. Nowadays it's questionable, how helpful these things are, but you should at least try to report things by the official channels first, before you kind of do anything else. Okay? Because if things hit the fan, then you can at least say that you tried the official channels within the company first to report things, and then from that point, the onus is on the company to kind of act on kind of the news that you get, right? But if you don't report things, then, then that's generally ground, or that's generally enough evidence for companies just to kind of pin things on you rather than take responsibility themselves. So, you don't be afraid to report bad news, no matter the reaction that you think that you're going to get. Okay, number two. Number two is to adopt what I call a stance of critical loyalty. Okay. So, it's not a bad thing to like your company, to like what you do, right? And so a lot of people actually feel that way. And so you work for a certain company, you want to do like aerospace work, you work for Boeing, right? And so it's okay to be loyal to that, right? And to want to see the company succeed. But you have to kind of do it from a critical perspective, right? And so, remember, you're working for a company that they're paying you for your work, right? You're not joining a cult. And so, just because a company does something doesn't mean that you have to be okay, right? And so it's good to be, I always call it kind of critically loyal. So it's okay to, want your company to succeed, but, still be critical at the same time. Okay. Because, there, you may come to a situation, let's say that you're a whistleblower where you're going to do something that's going to harm your company, right? At least in the short term. But, but you need to do that to, not only kind of protect yourself, but also, protect the company in the long run as well. Okay. All right. Number three is just a good tip just in general, whenever you're settling conflicts between people, is to focus on issues rather than personalities. 99.9% of conflicts, and what seems like, someone is mad at another person, they're not actually mad at that other person. They're mad at the situation, or they're mad at the issue that's being presented, right? It's just that, it maybe just as humans, it's human nature, it's hard to kind of direct anger or direct frustration at something that doesn't have, a tangible face, right? So you want to direct your anger at a person and think that it's their fault that things are happening, right? But generally, when you do this, and probably everyone in this room has been the target of that at some point, right? When people attack your personality, they attack you personally, the general reaction is to kind of get defensive, right? And so to kind of avoid those situations when you are bringing up conflicts, disagreements with your management, focus on the issues, not on the management, not on the managers themselves, right? Even though you may see your manager as the face of all the issues that are happening, remember, you're not mad at the manager, you're mad at the situation that you're in, right? Okay, number four. Number four is to keep all your receipts. And so any kind of communication that you have with a company regarding suggestions or criticisms, make sure you keep a record of all these things and have them all in writing if you can. Okay. So this is important because you want to be able to have documentation in terms of when you said certain things, what you said, so that that you can kind of kind of back to point number one, to kind of make sure that you kind of protect yourself and say that yes, you did raise these issues, you did bring these up. These can either be emails, or they can be kind of written things, or maybe tickets that you send in, right? But keep record of all these things, because you need to kind of you may need these if you ever need to protect yourself in certain situations. Okay. Of course, people will try to prevent this, and so a lot of times, if a manager tells you that they need to speak with you something in person, usually that's not a good sign, because they're probably going to tell you to do something that that they may not feel comfortable with. But so if they're not comfortable putting it in writing, they're probably not comfortable They probably think it's going to make you uncomfortable, right? So try to keep all communication in writing, or at least get a record of everything in writing as much as you can. Okay. All right, number 5. So whenever you do have complaints or criticism, try to keep them confidential. Okay. So don't try to get other people involved. Don't get the media involved unless it's not necessary. Okay. That's not only just to protect yourself, but maybe a lot of times when things go public, things a lot of other things happen. It brings harm to other people that are kind of unintended. Okay. Number 6 is to make sure that you're aware of just if things need a third party to resolve, whether that be legal or media. So just make sure you know what your options are. Right. So sometimes this can involve lawyers, it can involve certain federal agencies, things like that. Okay. And so kind of alongside that as well, make sure that what protections that you have as well. So whistleblowers are protected by law. Um, when you do have certain complaints raised against a company and you're reported to, let's say, a federal agency, you do have protections, from the law, from the company, preventing the company from retaliating against you. Okay. We'll talk a little bit about that on Thursday. Okay. And number 8, I know time's up, but number 8 is to try to resolve things as quickly as possible. Right. Generally speaking, if you have an issue with your company, the longer it drags out, the more it kind of benefits the company, because they kind of have more resources and more manpower, more lawyers to kind of tackle you, right? And so, if you have a certain issue with the product, or maybe a certain ethical issue, make sure it's dealt with as quickly as possible. Strike while the iron's hot. Otherwise, as things kind of drag out, generally people lose motivation to pursue things, and companies rely on that to try to bury some things and not deal. Okay. All right. Any questions on any of this? Okay. All right. So when we come back on Thursday, we'll talk a little bit more about whistleblowers and kind of what that means in terms of what protections you have, and what are some stories about that. And then if we have time, we'll probably move on to some environmental ethics. All right. So thank you guys for coming today. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and I will see you on Thursday. Yeah.
Some questions about it.
Sure.
Is the template going to be posted, or is there a template? Is in the
Yes.
guideline
For the homework?
for the homework?
I thought I posted one already. I'll go back and post it.
Okay.
It's basically just those sections. I just want to have it separated into each section.
All right.
But I'll post one for the final.
Okay. And then for like quote and sources, do you have like requirements or
Just
having some for the homework?
having something is fine. If you want, you can just do MLA or something like that.
Requirements for like how many, or
No, well,
not using a certain number of quotes?
I mean, I want your own words and discussion to be the majority of it. You could use quotes to kind of back things up, but I don't want, entire huge chunks to be from articles.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Like, oh, it's like, it's really.